Hello, everybody. I am Bart Robley, and I
What's
am here with
happening?
the. There he is, the amazing chip ritter. Look at Jeremy is spinning his stick so fast that you
You
can't
can't
even
even see
see
it.
it. Can't even see it. It's invisible. That's how fast he's spinning it. I'm here with chip ritter Jeremy Steinkohler, and Rick Stojak is gone. He's down in Florida. We just got a picture of him and his mom. They are they're down there enjoying some time together on his vacation. And you are now on Drummers Education Connection. We thank you guys so much for joining us and watching our little dog and pony show that we do every Tuesday from 11 to 12. Today we are talking about something that I think everybody kind of wants to know about. I know I want to learn from these guys and stuff, but today we are talking about practicing effectively and how you go about practicing effectively. And I think more importantly, what the heck should you practice? What do you practice? There's so much to learn. There are so many great drummers out there, so many great drum books, and so we're gonna pick each other's brains and maybe have some of you guys chime in on what you guys do to practice effectively, efficiently, and become the best drummers you can possibly be. So, Jeremy. Jeremy
Yes.
Steinkohler, Jeremy Steinkohler, the steamroller
And
Steinkohler. How are you today? And what do
the
you
steamroller.
practice? The steamroller Steinkohler. What do you practice, Jeremy? What is it that you do about your practice regimen that keeps it, efficient and effective?
Well, I'm really excited that we brought this topic up to talk about today because this is a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I put a lot of thought into how I can be the most effective teacher for my students, and I think a big part of that is teaching them how to practice effectively and efficiently and spend their time right. Practice time is hard to come by for all of us. We're busy, we're distracted, we got all these different commitments. Kids got 10 different activities they're doing, adults got all the bills to pay and work and kids to manage, and you finally get down and sit down at your drum set and you want to practice, and what are you going to work on and how are you going to work on it. And I've had students over the past whatever 20 years, tell me to come in and tell me they've been grinding their gears and they're not making progress and they're getting really frustrated. And the biggest reason is because they don't know how to practice. To be honest, this is my take. They don't say that, but I recognize that. Um, so I know you asked me what do I practice, and I want to get back to that. But first thing I want to talk about is the key to you know practicing efficiently, no matter what you work on. And we can talk about what it is you're going to, there's infinite topics out there to bite off. What are you gonna practice? But whatever you're practicing, you got to practice it where you're playing it correctly. And that's the thing that most of my students struggle with is they play it too fast because the ego wants to get that satisfaction of being able to play it at the tempo you want or where you hear it, and they play it sloppy. And so they go too fast, and they don't spend enough time on any one thing. They're always eager to get to the next thing and reach that next goal, but they never really sit long enough with the thing they're working on to master it properly. And of course, that just leads to frustration and bad technique, and a house built on a weak foundation. And then they end up with more issues down the road that they got to go back and fix later, which is even more frustrating. So, one of the most important keys to practicing effectively is and being able to master something is going slowly enough that you can actually play it correctly, right? It's not just a matter of repetitions; it's a matter of quality repetitions, right? Because you practice, whatever you do, if you keep doing it, you get really good at it. So if you practice the wrong thing, or if you practice a move where you're trying to line up the bass drum and the hi hat and they're not exactly simultaneous, you get really good at not playing simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
You are what you eat. Practice
Yeah.
makes practice. What does it say? Perfect practice makes perfect, but practice just makes. I forget the saying. It's not just practice makes perfect, because it's how you practice that is so important. If you're doing the
Yeah.
thing just even a little bit not correctly, or the feeling isn't right in your hands as you're practicing it, you're going to get really good at getting it wrong.
Right.
Um, one of the forks in the road also that I find with my teaching that uh, I think a lot of teachers don't necessarily, recognize quickly enough is that sometimes the issue with people practicing or not making progress is an issue of a lack of understanding, and sometimes
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a lack of execution, right? And so on the one hand, they might be doing something wrong, and then you're trying to, help them do it right, and then you realize, oh, you didn't even really understand what we were trying to do with this, or what this was supposed to be, or rhythmically, or how to read it, or whatever it is.
Right.
And those are two important things to distinguish between, because if it's a lack of understanding, that's my fault, right? I've got to make sure that they understand what it is I'm asking them to work on, and I've got to make sure they understand how I'm asking them to work on it. Those are two really critical pieces for me as a teacher to impart to my students so that they can succeed. What to work on, understand it, how to work on it. And sometimes they'll come in and they'll, whatever, struggle with something, it'll occur to me like, oh, you didn't understand what this was supposed to be. You can't read it or whatever. And how are you going to play it right if you can't read it in the first place, for example? Yeah.
I think that it's easy as a drum teacher to, I always say, take for granted. I mean, it's easy to like, you got a student and like you said, they're struggling with it. They're just not getting it, and you can't understand why. I think that, like you said, that's sometimes on us. We got to learn to pump the brakes and go, well, let's back up a second here. Are you sure you understand how to read this? And then have, very poignant questions. Okay, what's the subdivision that we're playing here?
Right.
What counts do you play the bass drum on? What counts we playing the snare drum on? Things like that. And that's easy to have that as a teacher go past you. You just, oh yeah, the student gets this. And I've had that happen to me recently. I had a student that, kid's a great player, and then all of a sudden I started realizing, wait a second, he's not reading this stuff, and he was having a real struggle with it. So I had to, okay, let's back up here. Let's revisit a few things.
That's a really good point, Bart. Excellent point. One of the most effective ways I find as a teacher to check in with them is to ask lots of questions.
Yeah.
And so I do that all the time. I'm always asking my students questions. Where's the bass drum? Are you pulling your foot off the pedal, or are you keeping it in contact? What's your hi-hat tension? Is your heel up? Is your heel down? Are you pressing down? And all those things are contributing to the way that they're delivering what they're trying to play. And, sometimes, most of the time, they're not aware of it. Yep. And so all of a sudden, by asking that question, you bring their awareness to it, and then you also find out what they do and don't understand. Right. So if someone's having trouble playing something, let's say they're reading something, I might say, well, where's that second snare drum supposed to land? Mm-hmm. And if they can't answer, well, I know they don't understand it. Then they're just trying to fudge. They're just kind of fudging and trying to get by just by ear or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. Chip, what about you? What do you do for yourself practicing, and then also as a teacher to practice effectively or teach practicing effectively?
Well, Bart, I just first want to say I'm grateful to be here with you guys on the show. Grateful for the anointed technology we're using to broadcast this. And I want to say hi to Jacob Sosa, who's watching right now, one of our friends of the family.
Sosa.
What I do, I'm a big believer in pen on paper. There's something that's powerful about having a drum book and a journal or both in the same notebook or the pages. When I do my drum lessons, I do handwritten lessons, and they have a 3-ring binder or with their drum book that they bring in. And each lesson has a date on it, so I know when we went over this. I can tell where their progress is and how they're coming along, and I make notes on each page below of what the next move would be. And you're right, sometimes you need to back up. I forget as a drum teacher that not everybody in the world wants to be a ninja drummer, Olympic level gold medalist. Some people are not in it for what I'm in it for, and not going for the goals that I have. So I was going to say one of the biggest things for me, myself, and my students is having the goals written out specifically. If it's to play this song note for note, then writing out, the song and note for note, and then beginning on the mission to learn that song, starting to break down the components of what it takes to play the song, breaking that down further into each beat and mapping it out. I have a mapping system I use with younger drummers. It starts with Intro Town to Verseville to Chorus City, and then over the bridge. We start with like a pirate map, and then with the more advanced students, we just go by where the time markers are from 000 to 452 or whatever the length of the song is. And in between that, we just map out the blocks first. But having the goals written out is one of the best things for me as far as making my practice more efficient. I have my goals written out. I believe in developing rituals, developing habits of practice, breaking up the practice time, whatever amount the practice time is. I usually divide it into thirds. You know, the first one opening is warm-ups and fundamentals and rudimental stuff that I need to work on. And then the second section is the specific goals, the plays, the specific beats and the times and the things that I need to learn or work on or chops that I'm working on. And then finally the songs, the last section of my practice, I break it up into songs that I like to jam out to. And it's like the fun time. It's like the big reward after the vegetables and steak. I get to have all the ice cream and candy I want at the end of it. And that keeps me going and gives me something to look forward to when I start my practice. And I try to recommend my students do the same thing. And I ask them a lot of questions about when did they get to practice? How long did they get to practice? What are they working on? And by I guess it all comes down to talking, communication. By communicating with them, I can really find out what that next step is to be. And we focus on that, you know, what the next right move is.
Yeah, well said, Chip. That's really good.
I like that.
Another thing I find that students do to their detriment is let's say, you know, they've got a song they're playing or a snare etude they're working on, or a longer piece that they're reading. When they practice it, they'll just go through the whole song or the whole piece, you know, several times. And that's important to do, right? You know, you got to get the form and you understand the tempo and the feel and all those things that you got to get from playing the whole song. But what'll happen is they'll run into these. It's always the transitions, right? Like you play beat A for the verse, beat B, groove B for the chorus, no problem. But getting between verse and chorus with the fill or the move or the idiosyncratic thing that the drummer did, that's always the challenge, the finishing work, I call it. And you know, if you go through the song, you only get one crack at every one of those transitions each time, right?
Yeah.
That's the part that's hanging you up. Well, why not, you know, pull that piece out and just work on the move itself, break it down into the smallest little one beat at a time thing, then the measure before and the measure after, so you get the in context transition. And then after you've done that 20, 30, 40 times, plug it back into the song, right? Because otherwise it's like you've got a wrinkle in a shirt and you're spending your whole time ironing the whole shirt when all you should be doing is ironing the wrinkle.
Yeah. That's a good analogy.
I like that. Yeah, that is a good analogy. I like that a lot. I think that I like what you said, Chip, is like taking them through the song, you know, a piece by piece, you know, the intro and intro town and verse, you know, chorus city, you know, and then you find the confounded bridge and and you know, you're constantly kind of almost preaching song form at that time, you know, because one of the things that I think as a teacher, I know that it's really easy to let go of the song form and not break that down. Okay, we're here on we're chorus now, you know, and you can really break it down. I like that a lot. That's really fantastic. That's really good.
So I'm a huge believer and devotee of teaching song form. And for myself, you asked me about how I practice. When I've got a whole bunch of songs to learn, you know, I don't just sit there and listen to the song 10 times until I get it. You know, I map out on a piece of paper. I'm always pen on paper, just like Chip, the structure of the song. You know, I'm so good at hearing structures in music because I've done this so much. I can usually get the structure of a song with one listen through the song. And oftentimes I can even predict it, right? Because if it's a conventional kind of thing.
Yeah, you can. I totally agree. I don't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to interject. Totally. Yeah.
So, you know, that way I can learn a song. You know, for me, filling in the parts, what goes with the verse, what goes with the chorus, where are the stops, that's actually fairly easy, right? It's understanding the structures that I got to get in my head so that I can play the song. And once you do that, you know, you can sound like you know the song really well because you're in the driver's seat. You know when you're filling to go from the verse to the chorus, or when you're breaking it back down to the verse after the solo to be, you know, broken down, whatever. So Yeah, that's another thing about practicing efficiently is understanding song form, recognizing song form, and learning to speak that language so you understand how those building blocks are put together, so you can learn songs really, really quickly versus
Yeah.
having to just listen to it and like hoping you get it over and over and over, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you take pen to paper and you start from the beginning of the song and you're paying attention to exactly what section of the song it is and
Yep.
what they're doing and you're writing that down, it's called cognitive distribution. You're taking that piece of your brain, putting it on the paper, and you're letting the rest of your brain have more bandwidth to deal with all the other things that you're thinking about. There's no doubt in my mind that if you give me a piece of sheet music and a song and that I don't know each of them, and I want to learn them, then I'm going to be okay with the sheet music. That's going to be all right. But if I map it out myself and I take that time to do that, I'm going to be able to just effect more, like we said, effectively, efficiently, more efficiently be able to get to that song quicker and be able to play it quicker and execute faster than I would. Brian Tracy talks about 3 minutes of planning saves you hours in the execution of any goal. You know what I mean? Just the preparation right there. And I think that's a fundamental aspect of making your practice more efficient.
When I was, sorry, Bart.
No, go ahead. When
I was teaching bandworks classes years ago, we had them for a couple of years. We were in the basement of a school in this multi-purpose room, and bandworks, for those of you who don't know, is this school of rock and roll program that I started in 1993. We have maybe 35, 40 bands every quarter now, and it's a big thriving program here in the Bay Area. And I would find that these bands would make the same mistakes, form mistakes all the time. The singer would forget, oh, right, the bridge happens next. The guitar player would forget to go, to the next section. And these form mistakes would happen, over and over, because of course, you don't really learn it until you learn it. And if you don't know it, you're sort of in the dark and making the same mistakes a lot. And it occurred to me that really what I needed to do was impress upon them the understanding of the structures of the songs. And so I found these giant Lego blocks. They were different colors, and I took them out in a pile, and I put them together in an order. Like, okay, the whites are the verses, the greens are the choruses, the red is the bridge, and I'd stack them up in a stack. And
that's awesome. I love that.
A stack of Lego blocks. This is how this song goes: white, green, red, verse, chorus, bridge. And then seeing the visual, like, oh, now I see how the song's put together. And from then on, there were no mistakes. So, and then you can work on then you can get down to other more important, more musical, more subtle stuff, right?
That's awesome. That's fantastic. I love that.
Thanks. So what I do now for my students who are learning songs, even if I already have a chart, even if I already know the song, I'm going to have them do this as an exercise for themselves, just like Chip was talking about. I'll have them write down the name of the part of the song, and if they're not sure what it is, we'll talk about what is an intro, what is a verse, what makes a bridge, so they can start to recognize them when they hear them. And then I'll have them write down the number of bars. They're going to count how many bars are in the verse, how many bars are in the chorus. They write verse, chorus, guitar solo, vamp, chorus, and each time there's a number next to it. And once they've done that once, usually they're good to go. And it activates that part of the brain that starts to recognize that stuff. So the next time the song comes around, they're ready to analyze it and understand it. Yeah, and of course, there's plenty of times where sections come up and you're like, I don't know what to call that. That's something weird, and that's neither a verse nor a chorus nor a bridge nor
I run into that with songs too, where you're
chorus,
like, I don't know what part of the song we're in. What the hell is this?
It's some interlude.
Jacob, the interlude. Jacob he said, Jacob Sosa, counting bars out loud is something I make students do. And I completely agree. Jacob, 100%. I make them do the same thing. And even so much, I mean, at first, you know how it is. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4, putting the number of the bar that you're on at the top. And then all of a sudden you start noticing that they're getting better. So just 1, 2 and 2. And that's when it starts becoming musical. That's when it starts becoming more like, they're more comfortable in their own skin, and the song kind of starts to breathe and come to life a little bit, and it doesn't sound as robotic, And
a along with that, sort of along with that, teaching students to recognize 4 and 8 bar phrases.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
I say to them, they look at this chart I'll give them. We're working on Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's the first measure written out on the chart, and then there's 15 measures of repeat signs.
Yep.
And say, you're not going to be sitting there going 13, 14, right? I mean, you may, but that's a lot of work, and it's easy to get lost. And so when you start to recognize how the song's put together in terms of these 4-bar packages, the verse, left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay. That's a 4-bar phrase. Live for nothing gonna come my way. There's your 4-bar phrase again. Now I can feel those packages, and now I know when I'm at the chorus without even having to count a single bar.
One of the things that I make all my students do, and if we take a song out of the equation for a minute, we're just working on some grooves out of a book. You guys may find this, that sometimes a student, like if they're struggling with a groove, right, they'll play it 1, 2, 3 times and they stop because they want to stop because they're going to quit while they're ahead. They haven't made a mistake yet, right? And you can tell when they're doing that. And I always say that to them. And I tell them, look, whenever you play a groove for me, I want you to play it 4 times, or I want you to play it 8 times, because groove time and feel, it's a cliche. We preach it as teachers. Groove time and feel. You start to absorb and feel groupings of 4. Mm-hmm. And there are occasions when you're not going to go 4, 8, 12, 16. You're going to have a weird number of phrases within a song, or a weird number of bars within a song. But most of the time, like you said a minute ago, Jeremy and Chip, you can kind of start to anticipate what the song's going to be. You know what it is. You know what it's going to be before you listen to it. And you've already done that work. Like you said a minute ago. I mean, we're just kind of repeating ourselves here. You've done the work. You know that this verse is going to go 8 bars, or it's going to go 12 bars. And now you feel that. And so if you do get lost in your count, 7 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it was at 8 or 9, where the heck am I at? 1, now I'm in the chorus. I've done the work and I felt the music. Groove time and feel is very important. And I've played with musicians that, well, I'm just a feel player. Well, that's great. You got to feel it, but you also have to count so you really hit the parts. And when those 2 things come together, it's magical.
Well, and there's a commonality here, a common thread about all the aspects we're talking about of breaking things down and understanding them versus just sort of letting them go by and wash over you, to the layperson. And that's part of what we teach is, understanding the music from the inside. It's like you see the Matrix, and all of a sudden everything makes sense when you know where you're at all the time. Because as a drummer, you don't want to be following, you want to be leading, right? So when it comes time to go from the chorus into the guitar solo, it's coming. You're going to set it up with the build, the 8th note build, or the fill, or what have you, or the dynamic shift, or you go to the ride. And if you're late to the game on that, you're not telegraphing to the band, here we go. And you're missing the opportunity to create that tension and release point, that inflection point in the music. So it doesn't sound like you're playing the tune as well when you don't know the song as well.
Right. And you know what? I think we all teach from this place. I can't speak for you guys, but I think we all teach from a place of been there, done that. Right? Bought the t-shirt. I've done this my whole life. And so what I try to do is I try to teach from a place of, let me tell you a story about what happened to me once. And this is why this is important. And I will use examples from gigs. And I had a play with a guitar player for many years, and all of a sudden I started noticing that this person really didn't understand song form, and there would be times when, we have sometimes you have those long nights playing a club gig and you're playing and you're jamming and you're feeding off of each other. And we would do that. And all of a sudden the band leader would throw him a solo. Right. So he'd be playing a solo, and this is a 12-bar blues tune. It's a 12-bar blues tune. Right. And he would stop soloing at 10 bars. And you're like, whoa, you feel like your pants fell down. You're like, what happened? And so as a drummer, and the band would kind of look around, And so still on that, on, maybe on the 12th bar, rather than just giving a bucket of fish to bring in the next soloist, I go ahead and 11, 2, and 3, and 4, second, flap, ticket 1, and then everybody, then the hole is, you did do a drum fill because you filled in the hole that shouldn't have been there.
Right.
You kind of learn to, I guess you learn to teach to the students that, look, you don't want to do this. Or
Sure.
if that does happen to you, you want to be on your toes so that you can cover the hole. Does that make sense? Does
Oh,
that help?
100%. Totally. I tell some stories similar when I was in high school learning to play jazz, and I would go into these jam sessions and play, and come time for a drum solo, and I could solo. I had the chops to put things together, but I didn't know the tunes. I didn't know the forms, and so drum solo would start and would go on for a while, and then they'd be expecting the solo to be over the form, and then I'd go over the start line, and then sort of look up like, okay, drum solo's over, and they were like, okay, let's count ourselves back into the melody here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. And
Yeah.
it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
I knew what was going on, but I didn't understand how to maintain my awareness of the form as I was soloing until I got a little bit older. So
you mean in a drum solo, the drums aren't supposed to start levitating and have smoke come out from underneath them and fire shoot out all the time?
They can, not all the time.
Oh, see, that's where I'm messing it up. I swear, every time I thought there was supposed to be a dragon.
There's just not enough flamethrowers in jazz.
There is. Chip, that was awesome. Sorry.
Put on a t-shirt, Chip.
That's I was going to say that's $1 million t-shirt. There's just not enough flamethrowers in jazz.
Sometimes I've noticed when teaching a student a song or working with a student that's never, that's new to drumming, but able enough to play through music and ready to just take on some of the songs that they want to play. I notice that sometimes each student may be listening a little differently. Some students listen more to the drums than they do the other instruments.
Yeah.
And I found if you can teach them or talk to them about listening to the bass or the guitar more, then they can, where the drums are going to come in and out and what the drums are going to do becomes a little more easier to decipher when you're listening to that.
That's a terrific point.
My whole life I listened to drums, and it's only lately in life when I listen to an old song that I'll start hearing the guitar solo in Rush songs now, and I'll be like, wow, that's a great song. How come I never heard that? It was because I was listening to Neil the whole time.
Right. That's a great point. I've had students who have struggled to hear things when the drums are gone. I have some tracks that are drumless tracks, or when they're playing, they say, oh, well, I can't really hear the drums when I'm playing, so I don't know where I am. It's like, well, you got to be able to know, when you're playing in real life, there is no other drummer, so you've got to be able to understand how your part is fitting with the other pieces and where you are in the bar and where you are in the form at all times. You have to have that awareness, even if you're not consciously thinking about it. And that comes from learning how to listen. And that's a big part of what we teach also, is how to listen to the other parts of the band,
How to actively listen,
Right. If you're playing, if you get called for a singer-songwriter gig and there's a person, playing guitar and singing, and that's sort of the essence of the song, and then bass and drums are fitting around that. Well, you've got to understand, the rhythm of what the acoustic guitar is strumming, and you've got to understand, when the bass fits in, where that is, and how your bass drum part is going to fit with it, so it makes musical sense. And you can't get that by just listening to drums. You have to understand how your parts are fitting with all the other parts, rhythmically, dynamically, feel-wise, swing-wise, pocket-wise, all those things.
Yep.
That's one of the things I remember a lesson with Famularo, one time. He stopped me and he goes, you got to learn to listen to the song. You got to learn to listen to what's going on to the song. And at first you're like, what do you mean I got to listen to the song? And then all of a sudden you start realizing, oh yeah, even as been playing for years, you got to stop and listen to what the other musicians are doing and teach that to a student. Practice listening, practice listening and counting and knowing how many bars a song is or a solo is, or what the guitar player is, and why you want to not do something under a guitar solo.
Right.
One of the right.
Yeah. Here, I can't tell who said this. I think it's Jim Royal. It might be Jacob. Something about being able to play songs that don't have vocals, or when the singer doesn't show up for rehearsal, does the band fall apart? And that's also a common thing I see is, without the vocal reference, without the cue for, oh, this line is my cue to go to this part, people don't know the song as well. And that's like,
from Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob, that's a great comment. And that is a good test of how well do you know the song? Could you play it without the vocals?
I had a guitar player just when I was really young. I think I was either in high school or just out of high school, and we were playing a battle of the bands in Thornton, Colorado. Jacob Sosa in Thornton, Colorado. I was playing a battle of the bands, and I told the guitar player, I'm like, hey man, do me a favor. It was one of those truck riser stages where there's two truck risers and truck trailers were the stages, and the one truck trailer was higher than the other, and that was a drum riser. And so I told the guitar player, I'm like, hey, put your amp up by my drums, beside the drum set, and face it in, because I'm cueing off of you on this one spot. And man, he was really pissed. He's like, you're the drummer, you're supposed to be driving the band, you don't cue off of me. And from that moment on, and I talk about that in my drum lessons, cueing off of things, cueing off of the vocal, cueing off of guitar licks or a bass run. What if the guitar player screws it up? What if he plays the part wrong? Or what if the vocalist forgets the lyric? Hey, that happens all the time. Both of those things, and that's not throwing anybody under the bus ever. That's an observation. It's, to err is human. The mistake is going to happen. You've got to be prepared for it. So, being able to do it without everything there. One of the things that I'll do a lot with my bass player, hey, how did that part go? Let's just you and me play it, and we'll lock it in. So I try to teach that to my students. I want to bring this up because I brought up Famularo and the listening to music thing. I think that one thing that's really important is scheduling time to practice. And the reason that I think that that's important is because of two things that were brought up earlier. Jeremy, at the beginning of the show, you talked about, we all have, parents have got kids, and kids have got school and soccer, and everybody's super busy, right? And we're running businesses and all this stuff, and I've got so many students. And one time, Famularo again, I said that to him. We were at a thing at MI, at a drum thing at Musicians Institute, and I was like, man, I'm having so much trouble. Just I'm teaching so much, I'm finding it hard to practice. And he kind of looked at me and he goes, well, you got to, just like you schedule your students, you got to schedule that in. And he, in the topic that he was speaking on MI, he made sure to bring that up. And it really drove it home to me that, okay, Thursday from, 11 to 12, I'm going to practice no matter what. Put it on my calendar, to practice. I think that's something important,
Totally agree.
And, teach that to your students.
Yeah.
Do you guys schedule time to practice?
For myself?
Yeah.
When I need to, when I've got something important coming up, or I've got a big gig or a show, I need to learn tunes, or I need to get my hands, in top shape. Otherwise, I tend to practice before I get to my studio early on a day where I'm feeling like I want to practice before my students come in. Or when a student doesn't show up, I'm like, oh, great, I've got an hour to practice now. So it's not like it used to be, but when it's a priority, I make it a priority and schedule it. Yeah.
Chip, what about you?
Most days lately from 11 to 1, I'm hitting it. I'm in there and I'm doing my warm. I got this whole ritual thing I go through. I got a list of different papers printed out of specific aspects that I want to work on and touch on and at least go through. And so it's become a ritual for me, and I'm really, really happier when I'm doing that, because I'm happier and more confident in my ability, to teach, when I'm happy and confident in my ability to execute,
Mm-hmm.
This thing about practicing and scheduling is like, it all comes back down to goals. I mean, a goal without a deadline is a wish. If you just write something down like, hey, I want to do that without considering when do I want to have this down by, then it's not nearly as effective,
Right.
And I don't try to get too anal with my students and their goals, but I do want to make them accountable to make progress. Like every student of mine at least has to be making progress, or what are we doing? What's the point?
Right.
You just answered my next question, because I like that. What is okay. So here's the question. Let me rethink the question. The question is this now, because you're a goal guy, Chip. So you set a goal that you're going to play Sing, Sing, Sing. First song popped into my head. You're going to play Sing, Sing, Sing. And you want to play it, you really want to sound like Krupa. How long do you give yourself, and how do you break that down?
Well, I'm a goal guy because if I'm not a goal guy, I'm a next shiny thing guy, and I never get anything done.
I love that.
Whatever
Okay.
the next shiny loud thing comes in my path, I'm on that now, and all my other past desires and ambitions are left in the dust if I don't write it down and clarify it, very, very succinctly. If I want to learn Sing, Sing, Sing by X amount of date, I got to figure out where I am as far as playing the basic tempo, tapping along in time to the song, playing a basic groove that matches it. I need to figure out what it's going to take to do. I need to know what Sing, Sing, Sing note for note looks like for me to be able to even begin to think about how long that would take. And I also would have to know about what the student's ability level is. Can he swing? Can he play shuffles? Can he play jazz? Can he use his left hand on the downbeats while he's playing? Can he play coordination with jazz? Ron Spagliardi made a great book called Modern Jazz, Modern Independence Drumming, something like that. And it takes the drummer through all permeations of. Have you guys heard of that book, Jazz Independence by Ron Spagliardi?
I don't know.
No, I have not.
He's the old editor of Modern Drummer, and it's a great book. Man. I'll send you guys a link to it. But it takes you from basically playing the jazz ride with your right hand and your hi-hat on the 2 and the 4 to starting you working on the snare drum all the way through almost every permeation. It's just one of those books. It's well written. It's a big book. But if a student can't get through most of that book, they're not going to be able to play Sing, Sing, Sing to begin with. And
Right.
so,
okay, so that's a good point. Which brings us. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's all good.
That's a good point, which brings us back to one of the things Bart asked very early on in the broadcast today, which is, we spent our last half hour talking about, how to practice effectively, breaking things down, going slow, working on little pieces at a time, all those things we've talked about, understanding song form when we're learning songs. But we haven't talked so much about what to practice. How do you know what to practice?
Right.
Because, you could be a really good practicer in terms of your practicing technique and your efficiency. But if you're not working on the right stuff for you, what are you headed? What are you doing? Where are you going to get with that? And, I do think that that's one of the most important, those two pieces, what to practice and how to practice it, really are why you go take lessons. And that's our job as teachers, is to help our students based on where they're at, what their goals are, and what they want to be able to do. Lay out the map for them. If you do this, and this over the next, 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, this is going to get you where you want to go. Because we know that from having been there through that ourselves, and also, all the things we've picked up along the way about how other people have done it. But that's a thing that I encounter too with some students who come in, especially sort of the wide-eyed, pie in the sky students who want to come in and play, Tom Sawyer or whatever. They don't appreciate all the pieces that they're gonna have to work on to get there. Right. And just like you were just pointing out, Chip.
Well, and it's our job to be able to shine the light on those pieces and show them the positive aspects of why they would.
Well, that's right. And I'm a big believer in teaching my students how to fish, right? Like I could show you the part to Sing, 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 or to Tom Sawyer, and it could take you, weeks or months to be able to get it, and then you're still not going to be able to play it well, because that's not appropriate for where, you need all this background stuff so that you can execute that. That just doesn't come out of thin air from nothing, right? You've got to have all these pieces in place, you know, your hands, you know, your accent control, your independence, all these things that, you know, don't just come from nothing.
Right.
And so, you know, when a student comes in, if they're brand new, I've got my program, and you know, we're going to go through my curriculum. But if they're a more experienced player and they've got specific goals, well, then I'm developing a program that's specific to them to help them achieve their goals based on what I think they need, what their weaknesses are, what areas do they need to develop in order to be able to reach their goals.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're helping them pack for the safari.
Or for whatever trip they're going on, right?
Yeah.
Right. If for the safari, okay. If you're coming in, you want to go on a safari, great. I know exactly what to tell you to pack.
Here we go. Yeah.
But if you want to go to the Arctic, you know, or if you want to go to the Amazon jungle, okay, we got a different set of stuff to pack. There might be some things that are the same. You know, you're gonna need deodorant wherever you go.
And so as a teacher, our job is to really kind of find that common ground between all those destinations. What is a student going to need no matter where he's going to go? That's got to be on the top of the list to practice.
Right. And what specifically do you need to go to that specific destination?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
One of the things that I try to do in my personal practice time is that I always have a few things I'm working on, kind of like what Chip said. You know, I got a regimen of things that I'm going through, and I'll do something that, like, well, as we've been talking about for a while now, I'm going through, you know, the Will Coxon book and going through the Nard book, and so I'll play a solo that I'm good at to get myself warmed up, and then I go to a solo or an etude that I am not good at. I can't play this. It's terrible. And so I go real slow, a note at a time, put in a little bit of time, got my hands going. But now I got the drum set. So what am I going to work on there? What do I work on the drum set? Well, I do the same thing. I'll play a couple of grooves, or like Chip says, a song that I just love to play and get warmed up. And then I go and I work on something that I just can't do. I can't play this coordination thing. I can't play this David Garibaldi linear thing. I can't do it. And so I practice and I sound really bad, but I'm chipping away at the stone. And then I'll go in and, you know, like Chip says, have fun and have some dessert and just go and play and have a good time. Do you encourage your students to have more than one thing or more than two things that they're working on at a time? Because I do. I encourage my students to have hand stuff and drum set stuff, reading stuff and ear stuff. Do you guys do the same thing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
My typical student has between 3 and 5 projects that they're working on simultaneously. Usually,
good.
It's almost always at least 4. And sometimes it'll be more. Sometimes it'll be as many as 6 things. But you know, you got to be careful because you can't. You got to give them. They got to be able to succeed with the amount of time they have, right?
Yeah.
You don't overwhelm them, make them feel like they got nothing done, and you don't want to give them too little, so that they're not satisfied and not chomping at the bit for more. And I think, you know, I often use that same analogy of the vegetables and the dessert, and I think it's important to balance out some stuff that's going to be relatively easy for them to acquire, that they're going to have some quick, easy success with, like, that's giving me some satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
And then some stuff that's going to be more challenging, because if it's all vegetables all the time, that's a recipe for discouragement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm a fan of having them each have their own 3-ring binder, and all the pages we've ever done are in that book. And I can go through that book and point out exactly where we're not working based on what they're doing most recently. You know what I mean? And if they're missing a certain lick on their left hand or the left hand double, I can go back to earlier in the book and say, okay, this page we want to put at the front of the book now, and start working on that so we can nail this lick and get your left hand up where it needs to be. You know?
Right.
Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. Very good. And then now, this brings up the a question that I have for And I don't want to point this specifically at Chip because I think that we all know Chip is the showman of showmans. But I do agree,
He's
you
a
know, you
shaman. He's
can't.
a shaman of showmen.
He's a shaman. He's a shaman of showmen.
Shaman of showmen.
That's almost as good
You're on a roll
as
today,
jazz.
Jeremy.
Jazz just doesn't have enough flamethrowers. I can't say it. Flame. Okay, I think that showmanship is an incredibly big thing. This doesn't record really well, doesn't come across on record. But when you're playing a gig, and you can play the fastest paradiddle radamucus in the world and play everything right, and people are like, "Oh yeah, that's really good," but you go like this and like, "Oh my god,"
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys talk about with showmanship? Chip, I know what you're gonna say, and you've already said a couple of times in a few shows. I don't really teach juggling sticks during lessons or stuff like that. But what if somebody wants to learn that stuff? How much emphasis do you put on that? Because I think it's very important, personally.
I gotta take it each case by case basis and see where they're at. Again, I don't teach juggling or stick tricks when I teach. I just don't. That's like one of the last things that comes up when they're getting in a band and they're doing a live shows. When they're actually in a band and they're doing gigs, then it comes up a little bit. We start talking about it. But for the most part, 95% of all my lessons have nothing to do with showmanship.
Cool.
I take it on a case by case basis, and usually when somebody brings it up, I'll discuss it. Like I'll help them learn the trick and show them how to do the move. But I kind of I don't put too much heat on it, man. I just go right back into what we're doing and why we're doing it. And usually that's for the song and to play the song.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's
how
awesome.
They play the song after they can get in the boat and take that adventure and get to that destination. How they play that song is up to them. And once they got that going, and if they got all the pieces to the puzzle and everything's clicking on all cylinders, then maybe we add some showmanship.
Cool. What about you, Jeremy? I know that's something that is the opposite end of the stick for you, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I just tell them to watch a video of Chip Ritter usually. No. I mean, I do sometimes show Chip Ritter videos just to show people what's possible in that department.
I do too.
But
Thank you.
I mean, I think I've been to shows where the drummer appeared, or not just drummer, guitar player, bass player, I've seen it all, appeared visually checked out.
Yes.
They weren't, they just didn't seem to be they didn't seem to be present. They didn't seem to be focused on the music.
Yep.
And it has an impact on how you hear what they're playing when you see that. And I write about that in my book a little bit. And I've also, I'm not a great showman when I play. Like my students, they say, "Oh yeah, you get your drummer face," where I've got my mouth hanging open, catching flies. And because I'm in the zone, and people know, oh yeah, he's in the zone and he's super concentrating and focused. But it's something I need to work on, and I don't usually talk about it until I see my students perform. And then if I notice something like, okay, you're playing great, but you don't look like you're having a good time. And how can you project what you're feeling on the inside, on the outside? Because it does impact how you come across musically, visually, at least to the audience. So, sometimes I'll just do this, remember to smile, or whatever. Or think about where you're focusing your physical energy. Some people, I don't know if you guys have this, but some people, myself included, kind of have like a permanent swivel of their head when they play. Some guys just kind of look to the left when they're playing, and some guys look to the right, just as a general default.
Mm-hmm.
So just being conscious of that stuff, you don't become conscious of it until you start watching, either watching other drummers, but watching videos of yourself playing. Right. And that's a thing to work on. It's definitely something I need to be more aware of. And
that's.
I think
that's not showmanship exactly. I know you're talking about like stick tricks and flair, but
maybe. Go ahead, Chip. Go ahead, Chip. Go ahead.
That's a powerful aspect in making your practice efficient. Is recording the results and reviewing the results.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. If I'm working on a drum solo and I'm really happy with it and I think it's great, I can record that on my phone, go home and sit down and watch it and separate myself, put a day between it and separate myself and look at it from an objective source as possible, non-biased, and watch it and then really think about it. There's so many things I can make better.
Yeah.
There's things that I can do that are, hey, that was good. I try to be fair to myself and be confident and be like, okay, you did that great, but let's work on this a little bit more. Or let's work on that, be my own drum coach. And when a student sees themselves playing at that level, it's another level of making it more efficient because it's obvious what they need to work on right away.
Chip, you nailed it. And I like what you just said, put a day between it. I like that a lot. Don't just go home and right after doing it. I've always found it hard to listen back to, younger drummers may not even know what a board tape is, but listening back to board tapes or board recordings from the gig while you're going to the next gig, I don't like listening to it.
I don't know why you don't like listening to that. People paid money to listen to that, and you can't.
I know. I've always I'm so critical.
Right.
Sure. And I think we all are, when I say showmanship, I mean, Chip is, again, the best of the best. I mean, there's nobody better at it. And so when I say showmanship, I think that it's so important when you are on stage, not to for a pelican to land on you while you're drumming. I think you've got to do.
Yeah, you can't have your head looking down on the floor.
Right. And I've played in bands where, there might be a guy literally that just is, and I get it. You're doing a jazz gig or you're doing, not all gigs call for, the levitating drum riser and stuff. I'm playing about that, but I think that people hear, audiences hear with their eyes. Okay. If the audience is looking at the band, and the guitar player is just standing in one spot, or the singer just had a fight with their boyfriend, and they're standing there staring at the ground except for when they sing. Dude, that stuff is a big deal, and you've got to leave all that stuff behind you when you walk on the bandstand. So I think that for me, that's just as important as and I agree with Chip. It's not even the icing on the cake; it's the sprinkles on top. But I think it is something that needs to be talked about with students, because hopefully the rubber is going to meet the road, and there's going to be a point where you find yourself on a bandstand or on a stage or in a talent show or something, and you want to at least be smiling. You want to at least be making the audience enjoy themselves and not feel uncomfortable by watching you.
Let me tell you guys a quick story.
Would love to.
There was years ago, I was teaching these 2 bandworks bands of teenagers, and these are rock band workshops, School of Rock type of thing. And it came time for the final performance at the end of the 8-week session. And my first band was really good. I mean, they didn't make a mistake. The singer was on pitch. All the forms were correct. The tempo stayed steady. The solos were good. You really couldn't, it was hard to poke holes in anything wrong about what they did, but they stood on stage staring at their shoes.
Yep.
And the next band I had was completely different. Same age kids, but it was all boys, and they were just like ADD kids, bonkers, bouncing up and down. And, they had so many mistakes in their performance, like wrong chords, singer forgetting the words, going to the wrong part of the song, not getting the endings tight together. It was sharp contrast with the first band that had dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. But these guys were dynamic and amazing on the stage. The guitar players, when they took solos, they went up to the other guitar player and went back to back, rubbing backs, and shredding. And the singer was doing like stage, like sliding on his knees across the stage. And so there were all these things wrong with it, but they put on an amazing show, right? And people went crazy for it. And for the first band, which was way better musically, little golf clap, right? And for the second band, people were screaming up and, jumping up and down. Oh, you guys are awesome. So, it's entertainment, and you got to remember that. You got to remember that it's not just music, it's entertainment. And sometimes, depending on the situation, the type of music, the venue, stage presence can totally carry the day. Can be vital piece.
Yeah, I was
Go ahead, Chip.
I was on a cruise ship playing in the Smoky River Band, the country band at the Dock Holiday Lounge on the MS Holiday Carnival cruise ship. And I was doing these solos because I was studying Buddy Rich and Neil Peart. And I was doing these intricate, amazing, off-time, really great, choppy-filled solos. And there's a smattering of applause at the end of my big solo. And then, the band leader was like, why don't you do some of that other stuff that I saw you do on the video, like some of the run around stuff. Cause I did this one trick where I'd start the drum solo and then I'd run around from behind the kit and play the stage and hit everything and then run back to the drums. And so we were doing that and I, here comes the time for my drum solo. Ready? We're doing the wipeout. So here he goes. Ready? Go. And I took off from out behind the kit and I went out to the bar and I was playing the floor and I was playing the tables and people were going nuts.
Right.
Going nuts. They couldn't give a crap about Buddy Rich.
Yeah.
Well, Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich, but especially Gene Krupa was one of the first drummers to really bring showmanship to the forefront, right?
Thank you.
All of a sudden, the drums were the main attraction, and they went from being behind the band in the background to being in front of the band, and all of a sudden, Gene Krupa with his stick twirling and his terrific, phenomenal stage presence and smiles and head movements and
his whole body was very vibrant.
Oh, Gene Krupa got that, and he was always bent over the floor top. Yeah, and man, and that's why I brought it up, and I brought it up near the end because of the show, because I really do think it's important, and I think it's something that I know for myself as a drummer and a drum teacher that I've had success with that, because I had this one little kid and he was so nervous at this talent show. He was just nervous as heck. It was his first or no, it wasn't even a talent show. It was a recital, and he was just nervous as heck. He wanted me to sit right beside the drums, and there was I don't remember what song it was that we played, but when it came to a break in the song where he wasn't playing, I told him, I was like, dude, just go like this, right? And he could only do it with one hand. He could spin his stick, and so the band stops, or he stops, and the band's still playing, the singer's singing, and he just sits back there and he just goes, and dude, everybody went crazy. Everybody's clapping for him. The singer kid's like, oh, they're clapping for me. And they weren't paying attention to him. They're watching the drummer go like this. And they love that stuff. People hear with their eyes. So especially Chip, having you, as a a comrade and stuff like that, I had to ask. And I know you've said that that's not the forefront of your teaching. I just wanted to ask that question because I think that it is something that's important.
Like I said, I think the powerful thing for me is what Jeremy was talking about in the recording, and this being able to review. You show a student what he's doing and playing, and showmanship can come as easily as just like body posture. It doesn't have to, the fact that we're using two drumsticks is a form of showmanship itself.
Yeah. Very true. All right, we don't have a guest on the show today, so is anybody going to eat pizza today?
No, I'm not.
No pizza. No pizza. Jeremy, no pizza.
Not today. No.
No, I think I'm gonna have a bowl of cereal.
Right on.
But yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Hey, let's make an announcement. We already announced who our 100th episode guest is going to be. Right? We did do that. Yes, it's going to be David Garibaldi. When is that?
October.
I've got
18th.
it right here.
October 18th is our 100th episode, and our guest will be David Garibaldi from the Tower of Power.
Are we going to have any, I know it's David Garibaldi, it doesn't get any more special than that, but are we going to have any giveaways when we do anything special for the show on the 100th episode?
I think we could manage that. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, we could probably do a giveaway. I got a couple things.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's
have a couple goodies.
Yeah, we can throw a couple goodies out there. Maybe have some Garibaldi trivia or something like that. So
and
Yeah.
If you're
What's
still
a
watching,
squib cake?
yeah. What would you say? What about squib cakes?
What is a squib cake?
Oh yeah, right. It's like a crab cake, but it's a little smaller.
Hey, you know what? Real quick, before,
Thank you.
Josh
squid
Posey
cake.
said some really good advice on the show. Thank you,
Oh,
guys. Thank you,
thanks,
Josh
man.
Posey.
Appreciate
And
that.
I also want to say this because Jim Royal chimed in, and because we were talking about gigs, so I want to, because Jim is a huge supporter of the show. He's subbed on the show. He's been on the show a few times. Jim Royal. I always take the positive from every gig. I've learned from older players what to do and what not to do. When I was in my early 20s, success leaves clues. I love that. I think that that's fantastic. So I think learning what not to do is so important. It really is. It really is. So thank you, Jim, for that.
Yep. And speaking of leaving clues, we're going to mention that if you haven't heard about it already, we're having our first ever live clinic event on November 12th. It's going to be Deck Day down at the Aquarian Drumheads Warehouse right near Anaheim, November 12th. Tickets are on sale. You can go to our website, drummersedcon.com, and
I'll put a link in the comments.
And you can show up in person. Tickets are $40, or you can stream it live for $20. And we're going to have tons of stuff we're giving away, tons of stuff for free at the clinic. So please grab a ticket, come by. We'd love to see you guys there.
I want to say this too. I don't know. We haven't come up 100% what we're going to give away when you walk through the door, but I know there's Vic First sticks. There's all kinds of stuff. I'm going to venture to say this: that if you buy a $40 ticket for the Deck Day event, that you're going to, at the very least, get $35 worth of product for that $40, if not more than $40 worth of product, depending on what we give away.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of stuff. Will just be, everybody's going to get some stuff. There's going to be sticks. There's practice pads. There's stick bags.
A cymbal,
snare drum, probably. Yeah.
And they're going to get 4 clinics.
4 clinics.
45-minute super powerful packed clinics. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And and see right there beside the flag on Chip's wall, he's got some drum chucks, right? Drum chucks. And one lucky winner is going to win a dream date with Chip Ritter.
There you go.
That's been the joke, but we are going to give away a date, and Chip's going to
Well, I need it because I need to have some food. You got to feed me.
Oh, you're going to make the people pay for it. Whoever wins it, they get a buy. Hey, you win. Where are you taking me out? That's awesome. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. And we're just so thankful for what we do here. And this is just great. We look forward to it every Tuesday. I can't talk today. I don't know why. I can't put a sentence together. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you next week on deck. Rick Stojak, if you are watching, we miss you, buddy. Guys, spin out. Spin up. I almost dropped it. Spin out. I'm no Chip Ritter. I'm trying, though. I'm trying.